This is Rudkowski of WeAreChange.org here at the Free Your Mind Conference, an amazing conference of free thinkers, crystals, and just a lot of extraordinary people. Bob Tuskin's running this event.
You sheeple!
Okay, yes, that's Bob who's organizing the event. But I wanted to get into a topic that I have never discussed before. It's not something I'm an expert at in any way, shape, or form, and that is aliens. Now, of course, people will dismiss you as soon as you bring up aliens, but with the universe being as big as it is, the possibility of outside life is extremely high, and you should be dismissed if you think we're the only people in this entire existence that we have on this earth. And to help me understand this topic, I am joined by the one and only Jim Mars, a leading expert when it comes to UFOs and aliens. And Jim, you have done a lot of work for many, many years. And just to go to the point, what is the strongest evidence? What is some of the biggest evidence that you saw that proved that aliens or UFOs do exist?
Well, first let me explain this. I don't care how smart you are. You could have an IQ of 220, but if you're operating under incomplete or erroneous information, you'll never be able to make a correct decision about anything. And for people who say, oh, UFOs, aliens, what nonsense, I'm not going to pay any attention to that, they'll never figure out what's really going on this planet because they're tossing out a big piece of the puzzle. Now to your question, what's things that convinced me? Well, first off, as far as I know, I've never even seen a UFO or an alien. I've seen some people I have to wonder about. But in a 50-year career in journalism, I've come into contact with too many pilots, both commercial and military, police officers, military officers, air traffic controllers, astronauts, people who work on the space program. And after a while, when they're all telling you about these experiences they've had with these flying craft, some of them even with encounters with people that don't appear to be human, you have to just say, hey, all of these people cannot be crazy, and they're not all liars. So there's something going on, and that's the big piece of the puzzle.
We interviewed Paul Heller, the former Minister of Defense in Canada. He came out and he said the documents that he's seen, the research that he's done, he's convinced of this. Is there any new information? Because again, there's years and years of just so much research put together. There's so much out there. But if you could lead people to the best source of information, what is that best source of information?
I think the one incident that they need to really look at is the 1897 spaceship crash in Aurora, Texas, which there is even a state historical marker at the cemetery that says, legend has it that a spaceship crashed here and the pilot was buried in the cemetery. Now, of course, that's been a controversial subject for a long time, but I'm here to tell you now that the basic debunking argument is that it never happened, and therefore there was never a grave in the cemetery. Therefore, there was never a windmill that, according to the story, it hit and blew up and shattered. And yet, what we have found using ground-penetrating radar is that there is a grave there, a very short grave. We found that we did find the footing for Judge Proctor's windmill, as reported. But the key thing to me is that we have found small bits of molten aluminum, kind of like a BB, embedded in trees and rocks around the purported crash site. Well, where's that come from? I think that it actually happened. And this was a story that was actually carried in the Dallas-Fort Worth papers. It's in the Dallas Morning News of April the 19th, 1897. And this was 6 years before the Wright brothers flew. There was nothing man-made in the air.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, another thing I wanted to lead into, because obviously the internet is filled with really great information, but also disinformation. A lot to discredit everyone's work by just saying the most outlandish, craziest theories out there. What kind of biggest disinfo have you seen that has been the most harmful against the information you're providing?
Well, yes. I have learned that the upside of the internet, of course, is that anybody has access to the internet. The downside, of course, is that everybody and anybody has access to the internet. So you have to be discerning You have to, and that's tough because that usually means you have to balance off education, learning about things, book study, with experience. And sometimes that's tough because I know a lot of people with advanced degrees, but they lock themselves out of their house, you know. And then I know people who've had lots of world experience, but they don't have the book learning to either express themselves or to find an outlet for the knowledge that they have. But everybody's got a story. Now back to your question, what is the worst?
Disinformation, or the kind of clutter out there that's making people not see the real information that they should.
Oh, well, that's a tough one because it's just about almost any subject you want to talk about. There's the disinformation, folks. All right. I'm very familiar, of course, with the Kennedy assassination, and here we have we have a guy who was a ballistics expert, and he just got the notion that perhaps the Secret Service agent in the back of the car was going to return fire at Oswald, but he slipped and his gun accident went off and he shot Kennedy in the back of the head. Well, that's an interesting theory, you know, but where's the proof for that? Well, it's not there. And yet that story was ballyhooed all through the media. There was a book put out and it was reviewed all through the media. But people who then talk about truth, they don't get that same type of treatment. And so I think that the worst thing we have to contend with today is that there's only literally a handful, 5 major multinational corporations that are control so much of the media. And I'm not talking about just news media. I'm talking about cable, movies, records, billboards, cable, networks, satellite, you name it, all concentrated in these 5 companies. And they control virtually everything that the public sees and hears. And that is just not right.
Yeah. Immense control and immense just power to have in your hands, that you could manipulate people in any way, in any direction that they want them to think and act.
Exactly. You know, another key recent example of that was the murder of Lavoy Finnegan. Okay, I mean, he was shot in cold blood with his hands in the air, and yet the news media I saw, the major media, they talk about a shootout with militia. Well, it wasn't militia, and there wasn't a shootout. And yet this is what the public gets, and most of them today don't even know the name Lavoy Finnegan.
Yeah, that is also a very important case that only the alternative media was really talking about, and that's where people get most of their important information. But just coming back to the topic that we were discussing in the beginning, when it comes to U.S. government documents and projects, obviously we know about Project Bluebeam, but which project or document officially from the U.S. government do you think is the most eye-opening to you when it comes to the topic of aliens?
Oh boy, that's a tough one too because there's so many right now. There's been a lot of FBI documents that's been released, and even J. Edgar Hoover, who's complaining about the Army got one and we didn't get it. You know. I also find it fascinating that there's a document from the Chief of Staff at the White House of George Marshall, who wrote a memo to his president Franklin Roosevelt. This was in early March of 1942, and it concerned the great Los Angeles air raid, which most people don't really know about. But there was a huge air raid. People died. There was ordnance all over the city, and then later they tried to say it was just war jitters. Nothing happened. But in this document, Marshall tells President Roosevelt that they have recovered unconventional aircraft in the hills of San Bernardino and off the coast of California. But what really got me was, at the bottom of it, Marshall says, I've ordered a thorough investigation of War Department files seeking any information on unconventional aircraft dating back to 1897. The exact year of the Aurora spaceship crash. Wow. So I think there have been people in our government who have known about this from even before 1947 and the famous Roswell case.
Wow. And also, of course, through your work, you have many sources, also many people within the government. Are you able to talk about some of the information that you were able to confirm or get from sources?
Well, yes, I pretty well have. Anything I can come up with. I quoted Here's an interesting quote. In my book, Alien Agenda, I interviewed a fellow named Bill Holden, who was the loadmaster for Air Force One, and he told me the incident. It was in, I believe, the summer of '63 when they flew to Europe, and Kennedy made his famous Ich bin ein Berliner speech. And he said there had been some reports in the European media about UFOs. And he said Kennedy was actually pretty approachable, so he just went up to him and he said, Mr. President, he says, what do you think about UFOs? And here's what he said Kennedy told him. He said he looked very serious, and he said, I would like to tell the people about the alien situation, but my hands are tied.
Wow.
Now, that's a pretty incredible quote coming from the leader of the free world, isn't it?
Yes, it definitely is. Jim, I can't thank you enough for all the information. Your link to your website will be in the description below. You also have a new book called Population Control that you have out here now. I'm definitely looking forward to reading that one. But most importantly, thank you for educating and giving off so much information. Really appreciate you. And is there anything else you want to say?
Well, I just want to say that in many of my other books, this one I think is all important because it goes beyond politics, it goes beyond political philosophy. This is how corporate owners are killing us. Bad food, bad air, bad water, chemtrails, come on, radiation. We better start figuring out what's happening to us if you want to protect you and your loved ones.
Jim, thank you so much, and really appreciate the time.